Okay, hi. Yesterday, Monday, released a video which is on single tonality chords. So I thought we'd just have a look at that. Personally, I think single tonality chords are very much sort of underlooked and underutilized. There are really two parts to this. So I thought we would just go through it sort of quite quickly. Now, you know, when these sorts of ideas sort of came around, that people basically sort of sampled a chord and then this was then mapped across a keyboard. Totally cool. That's kind of the old school way. That's kind of the way that you can still do it. But my video was really looking at how we would simulate that sort of idea in Ableton, but like using the Chord Tool. So here we are in the MIDI window, the Chord Tool. We're going to start with a really simple one, which is a minor triad. So as well as the note coming in, which we'll call the root note, which it is, we also have +3, which is the minor third, and +7, which gives us the fifth. Now I'm going to try and go for a really light sort of piano sound, because occasionally in my cheap piano sound there, which is really good, well, I say good, I mean that in a nice way. And there we go. Now, so what we hear is a single minor chord, right? That's what we have there. So then when we do things like the 1-4-5, so that means we go up to F, and then we also do G, assuming of course we're in C, but there we go. We have a set of single tonalities. Now the thing is, the sorts of we can arrange that chord across any number of bass notes. That's kind of really the important part. When you listen to songs like Goldie's Inner City Life, right? So Inner City Life features a minor 9 chord. So that minor 9 chord has the additional notes of a 10 and 14. So 3 is the minor third, 7 is the fifth, 10 is the flattened 7th or minor 7th, and 14 is the 9th. So it gives you that sort of sound. So that's still the 1-4-5, starting on the 5, going to the 4, going to the 1. Now, when we listen to songs like Inner City Life, like Goldie, and maybe we listen to things like, a classic one is Inner City. It's only circumstantial that they're both got Inner City in them. But like Inner City, like Big Life, right? So like Big Life, let's turn off, yeah. That's really cool. That's kind of the sound. Now, the bit that we're missing, when we take these kind of single tonality chords, whether they're sampled or whether we sort of fake them by creating them using the Chord Tool, the thing to kind of appreciate is that we also need another aspect to this. And the aspect to this is basically a bass line. So the bass line movement is actually really important. So when we listen to, say, Inner City, so I've taken the chord off now, right? So we just hear the bass. Goes down a fourth, C down to G, goes up a minor third to B flat, and then down another fourth to F. La, da, ba, do. And then it repeats that, right? And then we get the harmonic rhythm. Now, as a bass line, doesn't necessarily rock our boat. As a chord sound, it's a bit more. Now, if we're in Ableton and we're using this, we think we'd like to hear a bit more low end, you can take another one of the voices. So I'm going to take Shift 5 and I'll make that -12. So this will give us an octave below the root. It gives us a bit more kind of bass, sort of a foundation there if we want that. So that's what we can do there. So the thing that is really missing in when we sort of take this sort of idea, because it's more than just sort of playing a sample, it is also sort of trying to figure a kind of a bass sort of idea. Now, one of the ones I kind of like doing in things like drum and bass, let me put this back to, say, 14, starting on C, So that's C. So I'm basically transposing it into the key of F now. C, D flat, F, and then E flat. So those are the root notes, but the chord sound that we hear within, or every chord sound we hear is of a minor ninth. I'll just put the bass in there as well, give it a -12. So that's C, D flat, F, E flat. So that's a G flat F, then moving back down to C. So the thing is that what we kind of want to do is to sort of try and map out what could be defined as the bassline movement. The bassline movement is going to be the idea that is kind of like the glue that sort of holds this whole thing together. Because if we don't have that bassline movement, I mean, if we just did 1/4/5s, that's fine, right? But the thing about these sorts of chords is it gives us the opportunity to exploit bass lines that kind of hang together really well. So here, the D flat, the C to D flat is a semitone, upper third, upper major third to F, and then down the tone to the E flat, and then basically with some kind of rhythmic kind of sequence to it, right? So we have that. What we have now is basically a gluing factor, which is the bass line. And the bass line is actually really important. And the thing is that, in many ways, having a static bass line is kind of detrimental to kind of using this sort of approach. You kind of need one that is that sort of like the inner city one is quite well constructed, right? So it behaves in a very much a structured way. It's C down to G, down a fourth, up a third, down a fourth. So you've got this almost this kind of sequential idea of sound. It's the same idea, C to G, then transposed down a tone, and then back in a loop. So you're kind of looking for that sort of idea. When we listen to something like Goldie's Inner City Life, that one starts in E minor. So there's the idea. La da 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 ba ba. La da 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 da. So we get that sort of idea. That's D. La da 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 da, right? Da 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 ba ba da. So we have E for the majority of that sequence, followed by the notes D and then C. For each of those, the chord sound is not changing. It's basically just the minor ninth, right? So it's the combination of the sound plus the plus this kind of bass line. And this bass line, if I take the chord tool off, is just, it's what I lovingly refer to as Three Blind Mice. Right? Da, 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 Three Blind Mice, right? That's what it is. But then when we hear it, we don't hear Three Blind Mice. You hear richness. I mean, if my computer wasn't going to fall over by streaming and also running a wavetable string, blah, 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 right? But you get the idea that Three Blind Mice is somehow magically transformed into something with more gravitas, more meaning, more depth, more, oof. So this is really what's kind of lying on the other at the other sort of side of this, is that we should be able to, or we shouldn't really be afraid to kind of really explore odd's not even the right word, but just shifts that are less common, that create this kind of intriguing kind of tonalities when we hear them sort of expressed in a kind of a complete kind of song, right? So if that's Inner City Life, but in another, it could be that, right? what we then need is kind of imagining what it will sound like if we change that into, say, a much, you know, a bigger kind of string sound or something like that, and we find ourselves with a more interesting kind of proposition. And that's really what is kind of at the core of this idea that you take this kind of chord sound. It tends to be really effective against things like the minor chord, minor seventh, the minor ninth, all of kind of the deep house chords, all of those work. Major sevenths are okay, but, you know, don't quite work in the same sort of dominant sevenths. You should probably avoid as much as possible. But let's say that I change this into a major seventh. So that means we change the first voice, shift 1, we change it to 4, and that will give us a major third. And shift 3, which is the third voice, we change to 11, that will give us a major seventh, right? Starts to sound like David Bowie's Changes, if you know that song, but at that point it doesn't. So this kind of major seventh sound is a little bit more. So that's the same bass note or bass sequence as Inner City, like Big Fun, right? Doesn't quite feel the same. I should have really just copied the duplicated the plugin. You know, as a minor, just kind of has the edge, right? Major seventh. So you would be looking for the sort of the bass type sort of sequences that might kind of work here. Now, one of the things that I find really interesting about these sorts of ideas, let me illustrate it here because it might help you kind of understand what I'm driving towards. So this is a chord of C minor 7. Now, when we think about things like bass lines, where do bass lines come from, you know, or the sorts of structures that we could actually put in place. So a chord is organized as well as a simultaneous sound, hearing 4 notes together, which is that, right? So that's C, D sharp or E flat, G and B flat, or A sharp as it is there. Luckily, live 11 is gonna fix that issue. So we won't have to have this kind of mini existential crisis of me going, it's B flat, and anyone looking at this going, but there isn't a B flat, there's an A sharp, you know, it's really B flat in C minor, and likewise the same with D sharp. But anyway, that's to come. So as well as being organized as a block of sound, right, there's that, we also have them as intervals from one to the next. So C to, there we go. So C to D sharp or E flat is a minor third. C to G is a fifth. And C to A sharp or B flat is what's known as the flattened seventh, the minor seventh, right? So it's C to D sharp, E flat. Sorry, I'm going to keep referring to it as E flat. Minor third, C to G, fifth, and C to B flat, up to B flat, minor seventh. Remember that we can also go in the opposite direction as well. We can go from C down to the B flat. That's also possible. So we should never ignore these kind of deviations, you know. So that's what we have there. So C to D flat, so this is how, or C to E flat, sorry, not D sharp. C to E flat is the distance of a minor third. G to B flat is also the distance of a minor third. Right? So what we can also do is to sort of drive this chord into 2 distinct kind of groups, each one separated by a minor third. C to E flat, G to B flat, right? So that means that a bass line could be the movement between those 2 sort of blocks. So let me put the chords back on here. We're not going to hear those anyway, but hopefully you'll see them come up on the chord. No, it only shows the one. So we'll see the bass notes, but we won't hear the outputs. Well, we'll hear the outputs, but we won't see them. So we can have that. I mean, one of the things that I sort of hear is almost like that bass line should be like an octave lower. So if it goes up, the next one should be down, right? Up, down. Right? So we've got them split into two sets of thirds, C to E flat, G to B flat. That's the pattern. Now the next pattern that we can also see is that C to G is a fifth, and E flat to B flat, that's the D sharp to the A sharp, are also fifths. That means that this chord can be organized into another set of two distinct groups, each being a fifth apart. C to G, E flat to B flat, right? So let me turn the chord tool off. There's the C and G, and there's the E flat and the B flat. Sonically, I mean, in terms of the interval sound, they're still fifths. Yes, it's going up, but the distance, the relationship is maintained. That means that could also be the source of a bass line. I'm going to drop this an octave. So that's C to G, E flat to B flat. And so on, right? So we could also use that as a source of sort of bass lines. We could, I'm just going to turn my fan on because I hear the processor fan has turned on this one. So sources for bass lines can also be derived from within the unit that we're dealing with, and the unit we're dealing with is this minor seventh chord. Of course, we also had it as a minor ninth, so that we get that sweeter sound, but we can still use the what we call the root third, fifth, seventh as the source of the bass lines. So that's going in interval order. That's going from the lowest note of the chord. I'm going to drop this down an octave so that we can be in the right area. There we go. So that's going one after the other, going in interval, what we call interval order. So here we have them split into two sets of thirds, C to D sharp or E flat, G to B flat or A sharp. We can also reverse them. So as well as playing them from low to high, we can also play them from high to low, which means we could have E flat down to C, B flat down to G, could have that. We can also have, mix them up. You can have going up, down, right. They'll start to merge into each other, but I think you get the idea. We can go from that one might be a better one than the previous one. So you can see that there are lots of different sorts of options that we could actually sort of explore and try out. The next one is the one by the fifths, so that's C to G, E flat, B flat. So we could go the other way. You could go down, B flat, G, there's also that, right? I mean, there are lots of kind of, whether they're permutations or whether they're options or they're combinations, because they become combinations when you take a few of these these sort of permutations and you start to combine them to sort of generate different kind of outputs. So they kind of become combinations, what is referred to as combinatronics. So we might well sort of go through that. Permutations just mean that we sort of articulate or identify all of the different unique sequences or instances that we can do. So looking at 4 notes, C, E flat, G, B flat, we could say, you know, how many unique sequences do we have? Well, we could have them in 3s, you know, right? You can have them as groups of 3 as well if you wanted to do that. We can have them in arrayed as 4, going down, going up, starting from the middle, G, right? Loads of different kind of versions. They just need to be kind of unique. I'm not necessarily saying that each one is going to be or going to result in the greatest music that you've ever kind of made, but you get to kind of look at your available set of, you know, notes or sort of options. You look at them and you think, how many options do I have? Because in many ways, when we sample a chord sound, and let's say that chord sound is C minor, we get kind of hoodwinked by the fact that it says C minor, and we sort of start to orientate ourselves in that sort of way. Whereas when you look at C minor or C minor 7 or C minor 9, you know, like the Goldie tune, you look at it as a kind of a unit of sound. And then you start to move that sound around into interesting locations. So you don't operate on the sound itself, and you know, you can still shape the sound in terms of filtering and various other things, but we're not going to be able to dive in and change the notes. Because I'm using the MIDI tool here, the Chord Tool, we can go in and we can change the notes. We can automate it. We can do all of those sorts of things. That's fantastic. And obviously, if you want to change it, you can use things like Melodyne, which will give you an almost per note or per voice access, and then you can just shift it a semitone. I would argue that that kind of goes against what these sorts of ideas are about. When you listen to Goldie Again, or you listen to Inner City or anything else like that that make use of these single tonality type sounds, that going in and being able to change the notes is kind of modifying the game, to be honest, right? But you know, each to his own. It's up to you what you want to do. But if you kind of want to sort of operate within that kind of mindset, then the way that we modify the sound, we can shape the sound, filters and modulation, whatever else we're going to use, but we're going to extract the most type of value out of it, both by having interesting bass lines or interesting collections of notes to form the bass line. So when I look at things like Goldie's Inner City, you know, like I said, it starts on, let me change that back to a minor third, shall I? And let me change that back down. I mean, that as a sound that I just played, that's just basically going through the notes of the C minor triad, but having the chord sound of a minor ninth or minor seventh that's playing. Yeah, minor ninth. So we've got the octave as well below there. That actually, what we now, you know, and then tied to some kind of harmonic rhythm. So the harmonic rhythm is the rhythm of the chords in terms of the changes, like how often the changes take place, you know, how often we should, you know, how the frequency of change, right? You know, I mean, whilst they may well, generationally, these songs may well feel like they're in completely different zones here, but like The Doors, Light My Fire, features the movement of a minor third down. So let's say it starts from E flat, going down to C minor. So it goes backwards and forwards between those two. Now that's obviously something that people play, right? So, but when we then take something like the, we take something like this single kind of chord sound, and then we start to map it to these different bass lines because we're using a sample or an approach that mimics using a sample, we are free to kind of go anywhere that we want to go to. Something like the Doors, because they're kind of located in the kind of a blues type sort of mode of practice. Generally, their music was bluesy. It had a lot of blues in it, you know. So, but then when you look at things like sort of house tunes, you look at the sorts of bass parts that are in house tunes, and you can sort of take one of those bass lines or bass approaches and actually then use that into your, take this kind of sample chord approach and then move it around. My whole kind of, I mean, I have no real sort of desire to say it must be played or you must program it by hand or use another sequencer or anything else like that. That isn't really my purpose here. I mean, sometimes you want to be able to kind of jam stuff out because you've kind of got a rough idea, but it's not really enough that you want to commit to. So you should be able to kind of hear particular sorts of bass movements and then be able to just kind of mimic those on the keyboard. Me, I don't have a keyboard. I use the QWERTY keyboard to kind of to play everything, which is a limitation, but you know, it's quick and dirty, but it works. So you might, you know, everyone's mileage will vary, right? Let's face it. So it's really just kind of, what I'm trying to do is just point you in a direction and say, look, here is a thing that you can actually sort of try. Got a couple of minutes left. I'm just kind of gonna put my latency is quite high on this, so I'm really loath to kind of swap my latency out whilst kind of doing this, but let me take one of my drum and bass sort of, not burial. Let's take one of these ones, which is like Friction and Icicle. By the way, I get a lot of YouTube kind of claims whenever like if I use a sample or I use a particular sort of thing, you know, and then suddenly it's like, you took that from us. And I'm like, no, if you watch the video, I do it in real time. There's no way I'm taking it from you. Try that one. 174. Dude. See, that happens, right? It sees it in a half time. Let me put that back into 87 then. Maybe not that one. Let's try it. Something straighter, right? So the latency is really high here, right? So now, when we look at the parts, right, we just have the notes. I'm not sure I'm going to quantize them. I'll leave them as they are. So this is kind of a variation on the Goldie thing. It's 3 blind mice, E, E, D, C. Anything that moves down a major third. It's 3 blind mice. So you get the idea. So that means we can take this single part and apply it to a bass, if that's what we want to do. Hopefully this won't fall over. I've not had much luck change the octave. Now the question really is about, you know, what we want our bass to do. So the question is whether we kind of program that. So we might do a little automation at the end. Now what we can also do is kind of take the MIDI that's being generated from the cheap electronic piano track. So here where we go to the MIDI drop down and we tell it that we're going to take the MIDI from that track, and we're going to do it post effects. So post effects means after any particular effects. I mean here we need it after the chord tool. We're not so enamored of taking it after here because that's not what we're dealing with, right? That's what we'd like to do. So the question then is what we do with that information that's coming in. When we put it into monitor in, we can see it there, right? We can see the activity. So I would kind of suggest, yeah, you know, we could consider a different bass. It might be a good bass. I've no idea. It's just completely in the wrong octave. And of course also it's being given a chord. Sorry if it's out there, forgive me. It's interesting. It's cool. So what we might do is use an arpeggiator. So we can make it a longer gate, a shorter gate. We can double the tempo now. Not kind of quantized here, so we might want to quantize that. You can also see it's not legato, so we might want to make it legato. So that's the part on its own. So we might want to put a filter on that or something that just kind of shapes it a little bit. But one of the other things we might want to consider is sidechaining it either against the drum loop or against the chord sound itself, right? So let's see what that's like. So we're going to sidechain that against the cheap electronic piano first of all. You can feel it kind of as the sustain goes down. Let's put the bass in. It's not too bad. Let's try it against the drum. That's without it. know if you can hear, there's a little part in the low end of this dun 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 bum 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 bum, right? Which might be again like worth. This will probably make it fall over. It might be worth again here now taking the output from the Arpeggiator track, right? So that's the bass trick gizmoid. So taking that one, you can see we've got the here, so we can find sort of something else to kind of I don't know, see if there's something else that we might want to kind of integrate into this. Let's try one of the samplers. No, maybe that. Want to try the pitch tool, take it down. Let's do so for this one you might use the filtering, bring that back up a little bit. So for this, let's just try the last thing. Something like a gate plugin. So the gate's going to be sidechained, let's say, against the bass. Right? So we're going to sidechain the gate against the analog bass. So there it is there. Right? But what we do is we flip the gate. So we just get little snatches of the sound. Maybe not quite as much as or as little as that, but who knows. We try the EQ. Try the low end. Let's try the bass, which is arpeggiated. So wherever there's a space, the gate will open up. The other one, the original one, back in. So what we can do with the Brecken, which is the idea there, is we can use something like a something that just opens up the panorama a bit. So it's not all coming through down through the center channel. Cool. So that's the idea, single tonality. The idea is electing for a particular type of chord type. In this one, kind of gone with the chord sound that is you can find in things like Goldie's Inner City Life. and that's the sound of a minor ninth, and this is what a minor ninth looks like in terms of the chord tool. There are of course other variations that we could do. One of those is that the minor third, which is +3, can go up an octave. So if you watch some of our other videos, you add 12 to 3, gives you 15. So now the sound, it's at the top there, right? That's it with it down in the same register in the octave below. This time around it's going up. So what you get is something of a clash, or it's a crushed note idea. The two notes are jutting up against each other really closely. So that's between 14 and 15, right? 14 and 15 right next to each other. You don't get the same sound when it's the octave lower, right? So again, that's something to kind of explore. If you want to bring other voices out, add 12 to them. 12 plus 7, 19. Right? That's where we're going to. Let's just try one more thing, because that's now made me sort of think, we could do that. Right? So I'm going to take this one, which is the shift 2. There we go, I found it. It was all the way up there. So let's say that we start at 7, which is here. And let's say that we take that up to 19 there. Right? This is how we can get other sorts of voice sounds sort of in there by automating those voices. So this is just modulating the fifth so that it bounces up and down. It bounces between being 19 and being 7. Drops, goes up. So the way I kind of hear this is that it should come back down to the 7 there. So what we're doing now is melodicizing this kind of chord tool. Right? Just by modulating one voice, the fifth in this instance. Let's have a look at what that looks like here. 7, 19, dropping back down, 7, and then going back. And now listen to it in the context of the track. Right? Now these could be sort of, again, little melodies that we might kind of pick off with little kind of percussive parts. They might be string stabs, brass stabs, I don't know, you work it out, but that's kind of the idea. All right. I hope you've enjoyed that. Do have a look at the main video about this kind of technique. It's relatively straightforward to kind of do, and really, if there's any secret sauce, it's really not necessarily just about the chord sound itself. It's actually also about the bass line and the way that glues it together. Okay, until next time. Drop me a line if there's anything you'd like to see or hear or like me to expand upon. Really happy to do that. Until then, stay safe. Bye for now.